Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Two World Podcast. My name is Ken, and it's been a while since I've been here, but once again, it is my great pleasure to be part of the podcast. Today, we will delve into yet another episode of um, a TV program, a 90s TV program that is dear to our hearts, Northern Exposure. Today's episode is called Hello, I Love You. And I would also then like to introduce our two co-hosts. First, we have,
Hi, everyone. I'm Jacob.
and also we're glad to have.
I'm Barney.
All right. Right off the bat, guys, and I meant to mention this at another time when we were talking. Hello, I love you. Being an old guy, me. Um, right away, I thought of the Doors song "Hello, I Love You," and I didn't know if that made any sense for this episode or not. Um, how did that title strike you? Hello, I love you, or is it just because a baby was born?
Barney, or pardon me, Ken, is that the one that goes, "Hello, I love you. Won't you tell me your name?" Okay, gotcha. Oh,
That's the
interesting.
one.
Oh,
Especially, the name part was such a big
Mm,
deal in this episode. I'm sure we'll get into it. Just a thought.
yeah, I think that it must be intentional. I think that over some of the episodes we've talked about, some of the names have been kind of pretty straightforward, but a lot of them have been very clever and I think very intentional part of the writers. And I wondered, like, I noticed when I saw the title, I thought I didn't get that connection right away, but I thought there must be something here to this title because it's not exactly written the way that you would expect a title to come across. And so I thought there must be something missing. But when you mentioned that, and then when Jacob reminded me of the melody, then I thought, oh yeah, that is definitely a song that is well known enough. And then especially when this episode aired the first time, the people watching it at that moment probably really connected with that. And then also, yeah, the won't you tell me your name part? Like you say, name is going with a really strong impact in this episode, especially because we don't know what the baby might be. And then um, when Shelley is in the laundromat for the first time, she meets a girl and she thinks, "Well, that name's pretty good," and and we learn a little bit more about the significance of that name. I think that's for sure a really strong connection, a good use of title.
yeah. I think it's a wonderful title because there's so many subplots of the episode dealing with people who love one another and or are learning to love one another, as we think of with Shelley anticipating the birth of her daughter. And so I like I like the idea of hello being kind of a word that is about revelation. It's about expressing something like hello, I'm here. Like do you realize like I love
Mhm.
you, or let's clarify in case if it was ambiguous before or we hadn't talked about it before, as we think about Joel and Maggie and work, and this I know we're going to get into it a little bit later, but just the ambiguities of their relationship that they haven't ever quite articulated, or um, with our other characters, Walt and I'm blanking right now. Ruth Ann. Was it Walt? Is that his name? Walt and Ruth
Mhm.
Ann. Almost explicitly him using those words in the episode, like "Hello, do I need to spell out for you? Do I need to make it any clearer? I'm interested in you and I care about you." So, I think
Oh,
that is a great title, and the tie-in with the song is makes it even better.
Hmm.
yeah, yeah, I was thinking, as you were talking, I was thinking we could think of this as three different ways, hello, comma, I love you, and then hello, exclamation point, I love you, and then hello, question mark, I love you exactly. Each iteration of that title applies to the three different storylines that we have going on.
Mhm. Well, thanks, guys. That illuminates. That illuminates. Well, should we do the baby first or talk about the sideshows of the relationships?
Yeah, I was thinking that yeah, really the main crux, the main focus of the episode is definitely with Shelley. And I thought maybe Ken, you and I can maybe chat a little bit, give a little bit of background for Jacob, because the whole arch of Shelley being pregnant is quite an interesting one. Um, it starts off with an episode that I really like where Holling is obsessed with trying to plant something. And do you remember that one where he works for one of Maurice's kind of rivals in the area, something Springer. His last name is Springer, and Holling actually like straps a plow harness to his body. He says he doesn't want to use a tractor. He's like, I know how to use a tractor, but I don't plan on it. And he plows through the field, and he says, I've struggled, I've worked hard, I've done all of this, and I don't feel satisfied. I haven't had the sense of accomplishing anything with getting anything planted into the ground. I wanted to have the real hard work of a farmer. Um and then near the end of the episode, then Shelley reveals that, oh well, you did plant a seed, in a way, and she's pregnant. Do you remember that episode?
I'm
Hmm.
not remembering those moments, Barney. That's fabulous.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
And this is
Uh,
all kind of also kind of, do you remember the episode where Holling meets his daughter, um his adult daughter? Do you remember that?
mhm.
Yeah, and she ends up being just this really wretched person.
Yeah,
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 and
horrible.
yeah, so Holling forever has been scared of having kids because of his past, his ancestors.
Mhm.
There, I think there's one episode where he is worried that he has to admit to Shelley that he is descended from French royalty, and how they were the worst of the worst. They just really did everything to the serfs and the peasants and just ground them into the dust. And he said there was a newspaper headline, from long ago when one of his ancestors died, and celebrating their death. And he said he equated it as in, almost as if it were people celebrating the death of Satan. So he has all of this anxiety about one having a kid and hoping beyond hope that he'll never have a kid. And he said he had mumps when he was a teenager. He thought he could never have kids. And so um meeting this adult daughter was a big shock. And then finding out that he, then later wanting to have kids, thinking maybe wanting to plant something, find that he does. Then we find that uh
Yeah. You had mentioned with the plowing thing, Maurice. I thought it was sad that Maurice apparently wasn't available to be in this episode. His relationship with Shelley, if we go way back, he is the one who brought her to Alaska and fully intending on making her his bride and making her part of the estate, the manor. And I think the emotional side of that could have really been played, but sometimes people have other commitments and
yeah, this was actually a real life thing where Barry Corbin, the actor, was horse riding a horse and broke his leg, and
ah,
so he was just physically unavailable. And so we have the benefit of more episodes with Walt in them at this time. And so I think it wasn't necessarily that they intended for Walt and Ruth Ann to get together, but it kind of continues throughout some of the series where they're together.
okay.
But due to that, yeah. And yeah, and then do you remember the episode? I think it was season 4 finale with Shelley. I don't want to give away too much in case you quite remember. It was very, very unique take on all of her lines in that episode. Do you remember how that one went?
Yep.
Yeah. So in at the end of season 4, the finale, Shelley actually has to sing all of her lines. So she is singing the whole time. And it was interesting because she was commenting a little bit about Joel and Maggie's relationship, which we'll get into later in this episode. But
Mm-hmm.
they've done a lot of interesting things throughout all of this pregnancy. She spent time with an imagined mothers group with Alexander the Great's mom and other moms that throughout history or imagined mythology that were feeling angst and anxiety, who may, oh, I think of Queen Victoria as well, who maybe were not so prepared for motherhood, or it wasn't what they hoped to be, and that actually reassured Shelley. And then finally we get to today's episode, where Shelley is overdue, and she and Holling and Joel are getting ready to take her to, I guess, Anchorage, was it? To check her into the hospital to be induced. And one line that she had that I liked, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it. She said, why does she have to be induced? Because it is giving birth. Aren't you supposed to just give birth? And I thought, oh, wow, yeah.
Great line.
It's an interesting way to think about that. And I'm curious how you felt when you heard that start to the show.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was an interesting metaphor she used right before saying that, of a car being jump started. like how unglamorous, it would seem. And it's interesting how she starts at first by thinking, is there something wrong with me? And then she goes to, is there something wrong with the child, the baby? Like, why does the baby not want to come out yet? Is the baby, reluctant? But you're right. I think she wants to give birth. She wants to fulfill this sense of what is natural and what is a good experience that every mother should be able to have, this kind of willful bringing of their child into the world. Like, naturally, I'm guessing that's what she's meaning, but I don't know. What do you think, Ken?
She's a young woman, and I really watched her carefully to see how deeply she did feel this impending motherhood, and the way they let the three versions of Miranda penetrate what Shelley must have been thinking about as this time is now. And being a young woman, maybe she's more freaked out than normally would happen because it's the first child and she's young. Um, don't know how your wives reacted to their first child. Um, but to bring in the laundromat scenario of her being able to quote travel in time to experience what her daughter will be was just brilliant.
I wondered about that device where you see one character witnessing another aging in increments. I've seen that in other places, but never done quite like it was done here. I remember seeing an episode of there was this cartoon in the 80s called Thundercats, and then they re-released it and in 2011, I think, or something. And they had an episode where the main character Lion-O meets this small little being and from this tribe of people they live in the forest, and like they age very quickly compared to the lifespan of a normal human or one of the Thundercats. And he sees within an amount of hours the whole lifespan of this little creature. And, from the acting like a baby to a child with wonder and awe to like a teenager who's defiant, all the way to like an old man who's wise and saying, and it was like the strangest, most unexpected thing I'd seen in a cartoon. And then bringing it over this device over into Northern Exposure, I thought it's a potent device because it enables you to tell a lot of story in a short amount of time, and you can connect with universal experiences that people have. Most of us can remember changing from childhood into adolescence or from adolescence into adulthood. So to have Shelley witnessing this young girl doing that, and then for her to make the connection, this is like, seems like it's my baby. It was a brilliant way to give years worth of story quickly. But then also I thought it was very emotionally powerful. Like I was talking with you both before we started recording about how I kept feeling emotional every scene in the sequence when she would talk with her daughter, and there would be different pressures or frustrations or joys. At first the Barbie dolls and bonding over that, and then the daughter wanting to hitchhike when she's in adolescence, and the conflict around that being that's a bad idea, and you're not thinking it through, and then to the point where she's like a young adult going off to maybe try out to be a cheerleader for the Dallas Cowboys, I think it was. And it's like her mom's pride at her daughter getting to the point of being independent. It's just those. I'm sorry I'm talking so much, but I just was going to say it just pulls on my heartstrings of like being a parent, seeing my own children go through these phases and having these different emotions of like, oh, bonding over toys, and then the adolescent age, like having disagreements, and then seeing like my son go off to college and now he's away this summer, volunteering with a nonprofit organization. And it's like, oh, like I feel like Shelley's story is partly my story, but they deliver it so quickly and eloquently. I don't know. But do you have any thoughts about that? Either of you?
Well, and culminating in Miranda saying, "Today is my birthday."
Oh, yes. Yes.
What a moment! What well written, and the fact that she has a brother. Um,
Yes.
Boy, that's really a time issue there. It's uh, now Shelley knows this. That is so huge because everything else was, I know I'm having a baby and that's real. And what a thing to be revealed in your life. And I'll get out of here in a second, but I can't go on without saying to our younger viewers, perhaps, when Shelley sees Miranda as a 7-year-old child, beautiful child, that was Haley Kuoko from Big Bang
Oh,
Theory, who apparently was an actress from a very young age. I think it's Kuko, sorry. Um, Amazing thing that pops up that you see on the internet. Oh,
Wow.
how
Oh,
about that?
interesting. Wow.
Yeah, so she's been famous a long time. I mean, I don't know, how she progressed through her formative years as far as acting and things, but wow.
So I was looking online. It was this episode. Was it 1994? I think is what it was saying when this was released. Does that sound right?
yeah.
Don't
Um,
know.
yeah. So like kind of fascinating to think about 30 years this year.
Yeah,
30 years ago.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that I remember the first time that I watched it and kind of wondering at the beginning, trying to wrap my mind around this. Is this Shelley imagining things, or initially thinking, oh, is this just some random coincidence? Or and then you kind of you stop and there's this same person each time, or different people. But then I picked up and I thought, yeah, this is really a great device. Um and I like how they used it in the show, and I thought it was really appropriate for Shelley, as you said, how she still is quite young. Her character is quite young, and what a really wonderful thing that she would need to be reassured about, because she has been a little bit worried or apprehensive throughout, here and there throughout the different shows leading up, episodes leading up to this one. And what a great way for her to, um, feel okay with, starting with thinking, what's wrong with her, what's wrong with the kid, and then being able to internalize this, through either through imagining it or through this mystery, and then how she really changes from, what's wrong with me, is it going to be okay, is there something wrong with the kid, to at the end, rushing into the bar and then taking charge and saying, trust me, guys, I know what I'm talking about. Right now, today is the day. We're not going to Anchorage, get the get everything prepared because we're going to have our baby here. And I love Holling's reaction where he's like, where he just, it dawns on him too. And he goes, oh man, we're having a baby. And then, he's like, dump out the pasta water and start boiling, boiling water. And his friend's like, what do they, and then he says, what do they need that for anyway?
Yes.
Then the other cook says, oh, I think maybe to keep things clean. And, it's just,
Sterilizing instruments. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll get the pasta out of the pan and be good to go. Yeah, kind of zany, and that's
Yeah. But
dad.
I think probably Jacob, when you mentioned that, I thought, yeah, you probably have a real strong connection to the whole progression of this episode with your kids, where in my case, Yuma is just, the first iteration of Randy. And I
Mhm.
can't imagine progressing. Then you also, Jacob, you have daughters also. And then so I think there's probably a different connection that Shelley can feel with a daughter, and that as you see daughters kind of, maybe, I don't know if maybe in some cases the different stages of life seem more um, acute, more recognizable than maybe what maybe some sons go through. I don't know, but um, it was uh, as it was for me. It was very nice and very impactful. But I'm sure for a lot of people who have a stronger connection, probably was even more so. I think really they did a great job with using that um, as a way to introduce this newest character, and to help finish off the pregnancy arc for Shelley.
How about for you, Ken, having a daughter too? Did these scenes strike you in an emotional way at all, or?
Yes. Um, the progression, I think, for my own daughter was different, but the three quote stages that we witnessed were all there. In my case, a little different order. You know, pretty much the 7 year old fit well. The adolescent years, not a big struggle like Shelley had to, endure there. Um, I think our struggles were more as she became older, that version of herself, and things that happened in our lives. So a little bit different, but yet does it make you emotional, and do you think about your own offspring? Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I was emotional there too, Jacob. Um, but the birth scene is where I think I was the most emotional. And then when they cut to Maggie's face and she's crying, uh, and the fact that Marilyn dabs at Joel's head as if they're in an operating room, and this is what the nursing assistant, the surgical assistant would do. Such tenderness, and Maggie sincerely talking to Joel afterwards, and um, commending him after their struggles with competitiveness in this particular episode. Oh, yeah, yeah.
I really liked her quote at that moment. I think she said something like, "Joel, I think you really help people feel safe. You know, you did a really good job, and I think you have a good way of making people feel safe." That was, yeah, quite a compliment.
Good point. Hmm.
Well, um, just a really brief, quick tie-in, but I noticed that Holling said something in French just as the child was born, and I wondered why he did that. And now, Barney, in light of your comments today, I know. I guess that's part of his heritage. So that was kind of
Yeah.
fascinating. I was like, why is he speaking in French now? But
Do you remember what it was he said?
I can't remember. No, it
Uh-huh.
came so quickly. I think it was something
Uh,
around like, I think it was something like at just the right time. She's come, or she's shown up or revealed herself at just the right time, something like that. Or, but I have to go back and listen again.
that would fit well.
Yeah.
That would fit well. Mm. I thought maybe they would have Holling sing one more time. We talked about another episode when they did the final scene and they did the pull back with the camera. I thought maybe they're sitting close like that, but um, well done nonetheless.
I was watching
Tenderness.
I was watching this through Amazon Prime, Um, but I didn't see the credits at the end of this one. Did they play the credits on the DVD? Did you notice that?
Yes.
Oh, they do. Okay, okay. Because I was like, oh, that would be an interesting artistic decision just to end the scene quietly, and not have anything following it.
Okay.
But they do play the
At
credits.
least on my version, and I have
Okay,
very old ones.
okay.
Barney,
Yeah, I think so too. But you bring up a great point, Jacob, that they did do something much different that they usually do, where usually there's some song at the end of the show, of each episode,
Mm,
and then this time, like you said, it just they real a real quiet ending,
yeah.
way to kind of be a little reverent in a way, the way that they ended, and it was just great to add that to add that touch by taking something away from what they usually do.
yeah, yeah. And uh, birthing scenes on television shows can be sometimes at best comical. Um, I thought Shelley did a nice job. I've not given birth. I don't pretend to know, but Shelley looked like this is a strenuous activity I've gotten myself involved in here, and yeah, even though it was relatively quick, and they made reference to that, it is a TV show. Uh, I thought Chris was going to pass out at some point. He was looking shaky as as he continued to give the updates to the bar downstairs. I really thought he might pass out, but he pulled through.
Yeah, it was interesting because I thought Chris had just the right this episode, just the right touch. There's just the right amount of Chris in the episode, and in previous ones, I think there was one where Chris was trying to be too knowledgeable about how
Mm,
pregnancies go and whatnot, and then so it was interesting for him to have like a real experience this time to see how all the preparedness, all the study and whatnot that he had done, just for his own edification, and then but then to actually be there in person, and then like you say, it really impacted him quite a bit and was much different from what he thought that it in pictured it to be. And I like that added that extra emotion that we see of not everyone feeling the same thing, or um us not feeling maybe what we might expect them to feel or act how they might expect to act. It adds, hopefully probably gives that little bit of little bit more um I don't know, reality, or a little bit more realism to it in a way, and I appreciated that. And um
mhm.
then I liked the the announcement that staying with Chris that he had on the radio, that we see Ruth Ann and Walt tune into as they're driving back into town, about the newest member of Sicily, Alaska.
Right. And giving the exact number again, which he
Remember?
gave at the
Yeah,
beginning of the show. We have a number 844 or whatever. Yeah.
yeah,
Well
and I
done.
think that kind of referencing a question that Jacob had at the beginning. I think that doesn't he say that there are a whole bunch of aunts and uncles, eager to meet you, and and yeah, Jacob was posing the question of how do we see Sicily, especially such a small community, as kind of like an extended family in a way. And it was neat thinking that when Ruth Ann and Walt heard the announcement, of course they were both very, very happy, and then they just right away, Ruth Ann says, "Well, I've got lots of babysitting to do," and I forget what Walt said, but they right away, without even thinking, they just assumed the role of, I'm going to do this to help, with raising this child. I'm going to do this to help with raising the child. The only relationship is that Ruth Ann has um, the store, and Walt goes into the bar, and tells Holling where he's seen this or that bird, and but yeah, this small community that we have met over all these seasons, um, it's something very, very wonderful that they've created. And we see them all bonding together right away, acting as a family. I thought that was such a neat touch to this as well, to address that in a way through the characters very naturally. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and there's a bit of an extreme in this particular community, small but yet culturally diverse. Um, but so what? A new life has come to light, and it's time to embrace that in the roles we anticipate for ourselves, being the babysitters and the uncles and the aunts, and yeah.
Yeah, I think the sense of extended family you get at the end of this episode is so inviting and endearing. It made me appreciate the community that they were trying to portray. Like I've seen it in other episodes, but just with the birth of this child at the end of the episode, everybody coming together, this real moment of celebration and unity and joy, it made me feel like, oh, this town really is, at least as the way they've created it, a kind of a network of people who care about one another and at the end of the day want to support each other. And like, I really found that beautiful. So
In some sense, it reminds me um, of our church family. Um, Jacob is there, I am there, Barney has been there. That as I left the church I left, which didn't have public declarations like this church does, where people stand up and talk about difficulties, but will also talk about praiseworthy moments in their lives, and everyone will feel that moment in their hearts
yeah.
and applaud or laugh or embrace that person after the service. I felt that part of it, Jacob, when we noticed how that community, relatively small, really felt this birth wholeheartedly.
I feel like that's one of the universal appeals of that image is that human beings in general, we all want to be connected and want to have a place where we belong and a people or a, a group that will support us and accept us. And so whether it's in film or um, we experience it in our church community, whenever we see it, I think it's a very attractive um, idea. I think, it's interesting to think about like what churches, I'll just speak for our church. Like what we're trying to do is be a place of authenticity and where we can support one another and also um, encourage one another in a relationship with God. In Northern Exposure, it doesn't have that religious element per se, but like it does have that core human element of wanting to have a loving, supportive place where you
Mm-hmm.
are encouraged. And so I like that overlap between the two. Yeah, and I think at its best, hopefully, church could, if people don't have that in their life, church could be a place that could offer it, and
Mm-hmm.
ideally. But no, I'm so glad that you brought that up. Barney, how about you? Do you have any thoughts about like where you've seen that type of sense of community, whether on shows or in real life in a church, or how have you encountered that type of community?
Yeah, I guess just quickly to comment a little bit on what Ken was saying, that I think that I think especially if we've been to other churches, that sharing of joys and sharing of concerning parts in our lives, whatnot, isn't available, or it's something that you start to notice that it's not there because of being thinking that it's just growing up with this church, thinking, oh, that's just the way everyone does it. But and there's such a connection in that way that sometimes you really remember specific moments of when someone shared this or someone shared that, and that kind of thing sticks with you because, like Ken was saying, that we applaud together, we empathize together, we're all connected with the different members of the church as a body, and we're really kind of paying attention, kind of participating in a way um through our hearts when other people are speaking, and that's a real strong connection that we develop. And um in terms of this show, I think one reason why I really just like this show so well is that it does do these things that I don't know that I've seen before, or and I wonder if I could see something like this again. Is this a lightning in the bottle kind of show, or could something like this really come about again? Is there the time? Would people give it a series like this the time to develop and mature and stick with it, and before switching to something else? Um, and and we've gone through so many different journeys with these characters and seen ourselves in them too, in different ways, or in many, many ways through the different episodes. And so then when we have a real big real life moment like what we're having here, we can connect with Shelley, we can connect with Holling and Joel and even Chris, and um, we really see really something to treasure in this show. And it kind of leaves you thinking, if only I could, um if only I could find this kind of place in my life too. That would be really um really neat. And so that's one of the nice things about film and about TV, that they can give us this place, and about books, that they can give us this kind of place to go to. And um it's pretty rare, and it's pretty nice that what they were able to build over these 5 and 6 seasons.
I remember seeing an interview once with uh, Bono from Bono from YouTube, and they were asking him about the Joshua Tree album, which is one of their most famous albums. It has some of their most well-known hits. I still haven't found what I'm looking for, and some others. And he was talking about how like that album was inspired by like a mythical idea of America, maybe not like the historical reality, but this idea of like a place where people could come from all these different backgrounds into one society or one community, and come together. And how like a lot of what underlied that album was this idea of like grasping or reaching towards that. And then he was talking about how in their shows they try to take their audience to that place too, where they can experience something other than, you know, the daily experience, where they feel falls short of that and grasp or reach towards that. And I thought, oh, what an interesting idea. If I've understood him correctly, like part of art or theater or TV or any creative enterprise is to help us like have imagination and experiences of something more full and deep and comforting and than what we often experience, or that when it falls short of what we hope it will be, that art or the other thing can help us actually get to that place. And being a pastor, I think like my own response is like that God's presence in life is meant to also or ultimately fulfill that longing, for that place where we get to, where we feel grounded and accepted, and where things are set right. And so, but I'm glad that we kind of were able to reflect a little bit about how that is present in our episode through this sense of family in the community. It's pretty cool. Do we want to talk a little bit about the other connecting points in the show to the "Hello, I Love You" theme? Um, do we want to say anything about Walt and Ruth Ann and their, ride back transporting the cabinets? Um, I don't know if I know we talked a little bit about at the end of the show how everybody in the community gets to this place of celebrating the birth of Randy, but there's a lot that happens for the two of them before they get to that point. So I don't know if there's anything either of you wanted to bring up from their conversation.
Well, I thought referencing Ruth Ann and Walt, um, and Barney, your recall detail is much greater than mine. I don't really recall how much about Walt had been revealed up to that point. Um, Certainly, we were given hints that he had some sort of favor for Ruth Ann. And would this be the first time they went off on an experience together, Barney? Is that
Yeah, I would think so. Mhm.
okay? So we got to have some witness to some rich conversations that not only revealed their personal characteristics, but how they might be able to conduct this relationship. Um, Walt was very upfront at one point about how he felt about Ruth Ann and wanted to certainly pursue the relationship. Um, but thinking back to seeing it the first time and not knowing how it all turned out with uh, the joy at the end and eating the butter brickle and reconciling themselves, I thought maybe this simply isn't going to work out for these two individuals. Um, the conflict was evident. Jacob, but it's always fun to ask you, looking at it the first time, how you felt things were going for these two unique individuals.
Well, I when I first saw it, because I've seen this twice. I don't know if you remember at one time I
Mhm.
mentioned to you we were getting ready for an episode and I watched the wrong episode and
Mm-hmm.
I ended up
Mm-hmm.
watching this one. And so then, I went through it again before today, a second time. But the first time I saw it, I just thought, wow, Walt is being so deferential to Ruth Ann. Like everything she says, he's like hanging on her words and he's saying something positive and, you know, being very accommodating to what she wants to do. And he has some things he liked to do, but she has another plan and he just goes along with it. Like he wanted to go get steaks and she has packed, ham salad sandwiches and he's all right, we'll do that. And then, then they break down. He's like, okay, well, we'll make a fire. He is trying to be positive. And we realize that's because he wants to ingratiate himself to her. He wants her to like him because he is interested in dating her. He likes her. So anyway, to answer your question, I was surprised with how accommodating he was being to everything she was saying. And then as we went along further, it made more sense. Oh, that's what it is. He wants her to like him. And yeah, how about for you? You both what were your thoughts about his behavior towards her?
Yeah, I liked how he finally had to spell it out for her. He's like, "Can't you see I'm wearing my Sunday shoes or whatever it was?" He's like, "I'm interested. Can't you tell?" And we've known that Ruth Ann has had a family and has kids, and it's hard to imagine. It's hard to think that maybe she's thinking of starting anything new at this point in her life, but somehow in along the way, Walt kind of swept her off her feet, and um, but then we get that dose of reality when there's the tension in the trip. What are they going to do? And Ruth Ann is so focused on these cases, and I love how they resolved it at the end, where she said, sometimes I get so focused that my yams get burned or whatever it was, and then Walt quickly follows up, well, well, maybe sometimes maybe I'm a guy who likes his yams a little on the crispy side,
Shows there's a
means there's
fire in
some
there.
fiery.
Yeah, yeah, burning something, burning desire.
Yeah.
Nice.
So, yeah, I always wondered, I always thought, I hope that in the next few days they get that, truck fixed and pick up those cases again, just sitting there on the road.
And Walt misinterpreting why they stayed overnight. Um, he felt like since I'm pursuing this relationship, that Ruth Ann simply wanted to spend some extra time with me, and Ruth Ann quickly throws water on that little fire from Walt by saying, "I didn't want to leave the cabinets behind."
He's like, you mean to tell me at any point we could have got the vehicle going again
Got the
and
vehicle
we wouldn't have had to
started.
freeze our tails off? And she's like, yeah, I didn't want to leave the cabinets. And he's like, well, glad I found out about this now before I really got emotionally involved.
Yes, I like how he really was
Let's
very
see.
vulnerable at that moment.
Oh.
Oh man.
Thinking about the ways he was thinking about.
Yes.
Walt was a worthy addition to the program. There's just Walt moments. I Did you ever know a Walt? Anything? Uh, uh,
Someone similar to him.
I
Um,
don't think I've ever known a Walt.
my great aunt Betty, on my dad's side, was born on the 4th of July. She was a firecracker of a person, and she was married to a Walt. And they would banter back and forth when we would go to their house, and us little kids, we would watch them and think, whoa, like sparks would fly. It was Betty and Walt. And it was a little taste of this Ruth Ann and Walt in this episode.
Okay.
Yeah. How about you, Barney? Have you ever known a Walt?
No, I don't think I've ever. I can't think if I've ever met someone so dynamic as he is, such a character as he is, and yeah, the future episodes where we learn about his background. He was really into the stock market. He was a real trader, and then now here he is as a trapper, and just and then yeah, and then just that voice, that gravelly voice that he has too, is just so neat. There's so much to this guy.
Now, can you interpret for me his comment? He talked about in this episode, he remembered his days when he was in the stock market. He said he described the nice surroundings of the office, like it had mahogany wood and everything. And then he said this comment, and I was like trying to interpret it. He's like, I'd rather be dead. Is he saying like he wouldn't want to go back to that life? Do you remember him saying that? Is that what okay. I was just wondering if I got that correctly. Like he's glad he's away from that rat race or whatever. Yeah. Yeah.
And Barney helped me on this one. Ruth Ann's son is a financial go-getter as
Oh,
well, and
yeah.
Ruth Ann will certainly understand Walt's commentary there.
Yeah, that's right. She has the two sons. The one, yeah, is really into finance, and he tries to take a break and visits her in one episode, and then he gets drawn back in, and
Yeah.
he's like, "Oh, the T bills, the treasury bills are up. If we lock him in right now, we could make, enough of a profit maybe." And then she's like, "I'm trying too hard to turn you into your other brother, who is a truck driver who writes pastoral poetry." So um, he has two very different kids that that she that we hear about in the episode, but one episode. But yeah, we don't know much about Walt's background before he gets to Alaska, other than, yeah, then like you say, he used to be in the stock market, but now he's glad that he's here in Alaska.
Interesting. So we have this idea floating in the background of there's this type of ice cream that Ruth Ann eats at night as a treat as part of her special routine, and she saves it. And at one point, in the episode, then she gets it out, and that's when they find out the news of the birth of Randy, and that's what brings her and Walt back together. They celebrate the birth of this child, not with champagne, but with this special ice cream. So I thought that was kind of interesting to um, get to this point of connection for them after their conflict. We talked a little bit earlier about Maggie and Joel, and how after the birth of um, Randy, that she tells Joel, I think you're really good at making people feel safe. And that was their kind of equivalent of eating the ice cream, like coming back together. But do we want to say anything about earlier in the episode, anything about their story? I know we talked about it a little bit, that they revealed that they realized that they were being competitive with each other. That was part of the problem, that why it's hard for them to connect meaningfully, is because they're competing. And I didn't know if we wanted to bring up the part about the stomach ulcer and the Indian food. I thought that was kind of humorous, when they're trying to have a nice dinner, and then Maggie brings up, was it an aunt of hers who had this, or a relative of hers had a stomach ulcer, and she said it's because she ate Indian food. And then Joel corrects her, and he has this very what sterile kind of generic definition of like how ulcers work in the stomach, and he's giving her all this medical terminology, and she doesn't like it. and later she talks about like, why did he launch in all that? Like, why was he trying to, I was just trying to have a nice time. And I don't know if either of you have any thoughts about that whole part of the story.
Well, it reminded me very quickly, that was the second competitive occurrence, and this time Joel wants to one up. Prior to that, the scene is Joel is in his truck out on the road, going back and forth over dead wood, break it up to use for firework in his cabin, and Maggie pulls up and immediately one ups because she's got the chainsaw, and I'm going to show you how much easier, how much better that it can be here. Joel, in a sense, is saying, "Yeah, well, I have the knowledge medically." Um,
Oh, I
great,
see.
great dinner talk. Great dinner talk. And by the way, I have to throw in talking about ulcers. I'm telling you, there was a childhood memory. I've been eating fresh hot peppers virtually every day of my life since I was about 8 years old. And my parents used to say, "You're going to get an ulcer. You need to stop." Of course, they could have stopped me and didn't. And then we went to the doctor one time, and my mother asked the doctor about it. Same speech as Joel. And you're 8 years old and you're correct, and your parents are
Ah!
wrong.
Oh,
Oh, that's
Uh,
great. Yeah, I like I one thing I really appreciated about this Joel and Maggie moment throughout this episode is it feels a lot more genuine than a lot of what we've had in a lot of the seasons up until now. There's something where it really feels like they're connecting a little bit deeper than usual together on this one. And it's interesting because they're thinking, what do we want to do? And do you want to do this? No. Do you want to do this? No. They're having trouble thinking of something that they might like to do, and then they go to knitting class, and Maggie thinks that she's going to step up and you know guide Joel along. Of course, he's just the guy, and he mentions, does my masculinity hinge on whether or not I knit? And she thinks that he might not know what he's doing, but he picks it up right away and is so good at it that Marilyn, says, who's running the class, says, everyone, you should look at this. These stitches are perfect, and take a look on this at this on the way out. And then Joel, he just points out, well, yeah, I sew sutures, as part of my job. So um it's kind of makes sense that he could be good at knitting. But even though we think, as he said, we think that probably, oh well, he's a guy, he's gonna be terrible at that. And then later we see here's this wood, and we think, oh well, what, first of all, why is he doing that with his truck? I mean, it's because he's from New York City, right? But then here is Maggie, who probably we shouldn't think that, if we're going by gender roles, what business does she have with a chainsaw? But she just puts on safety goggles, gets a chainsaw, boom, boom, and she says, "See how nicely this is, and it's so easy to stack." And and also kind of stacking wood, we would think would be a guy's role too. And so here we see them kind of flipping, maybe kind of struggling for where do they sit with one another? Where do they, is Joel able to accept this, um, these times where Maggie is stronger in things that he might be stronger with? Is Maggie able to accept that he might be stronger in things that she should be stronger with? And then I felt at the dinner, I kind of sided with Maggie because here her forte is in cooking, and she's doing a great job. She even made what was it, the parathas, from scratch, and it must be delicious. And then, yeah, here's Joel. He's a doctor, so this is his forte too. And they're finally playing to their strengths, but it sets each other off a little bit. And I know that, Joel was, saying it very sterilely. So I don't know if he was really trying to get a dig in there or not, or if he was just saying, for want of better, conversation, let me just kind of explain this to you, from what he knows. But not that it gets anyone anywhere. Um, but it felt like here we have enough, overall the episodes, here we have enough instances of what are some of the things causing the conflict instead of just conflict. maybe because they don't like each other, or they like each other, but they don't like each other. There's something we can really sink our teeth into as to maybe why they're having trouble getting along. But as we've mentioned, at the end of the episode, they're able to break through that in a real, genuine way that I just loved the way she said, everyone, you make everyone feel so safe. And a lot could have gone wrong. And no one was worried at all one time. Everyone just thought that it was going to go fine. And then, even Joel saying, oh boy, she's going to be tall. And Maggie's like, wow, you can tell that already. And, you know, here he's saying something related to medicine, his forte, and she accepts it. And, just as not no argument, no nothing, just wow, that's so amazing about you being this doctor and knowing these things. Just her defenses are all down, and so are his. And we see that, wow, maybe these two, they finally have a way to connect, as there might be a real um future for them as a couple that isn't going to end up in fighting in almost every single day of their lives. And I really like how they worked that into this particular episode. And I think that could kind of be the I don't know if that is the hello question mark or hello exclamation point. It dawns on that. Well, wow, we really do love each other. And that was a nice way to bring that into this episode.
It did feel very genuine. Joel's initial response to her compliments in previous episodes, it could well have been, "Thank you. 4 years of medical school at I certainly should have the wherewithal to deliver a baby." He just said thank you, and
Like, he does like to occasionally say, Ivy League medical school or this or that, try to, a New York City doctor. Yeah, this was just everyone put their defenses away, and they really connected. It's really great.
Are there any other questions or thoughts that either of you would like to share before we close our time?
Then we would like to extend our thanks to all of you for joining us in this discussion of it was season 5, episode 15. Hello, I Love You of Northern Exposure, and we had the chance to look at 3 very engaging stories that all came together at the end. And we hope that you, as we are looking forward to our next episode. So for today's version of the Two World Podcast with Ken and Jacob, I'm Barney, and we will see you all next time.